Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a card featuring Gerda Steiner Designs clear stamps. This is the Halloween set, which is a peeking pumpkin stamp set. However, it doesn't only have to be used for Halloween because there is in fact no jack-o'-lantern on the image. The jack-o'-lantern face is a separate stamp, and so you don't have to make it into a cat peeking out of a jack-o'-lantern, but instead could then also use it for Thanksgiving. But for today's card, I am going to be creating a Halloween card, and I'm taking the Happy Halloween sentiment, and I'm going to make a background paper with it. I'm using a couple of different Hero Arts shadow inks, and a red, an orange, and a yellow. And in order to start my stamping, I'm going to start off the page because generally when doing a background, it is better if the images are coming off the page a little bit so that it looks more like you cut it from a piece of pattern paper rather than it was just that chunk created. And so I also am going to make sure to vary the different starting locations. So I don't want it to line up perfectly because that, in my opinion, opens you up to room for mistakes if you try to make sure everything looks precise. Whereas if you try to randomize it, you're going to be less likely to accidentally put something where you didn't intend it, and also if something happens, you might be able to cover it up a little bit more easily. I'm working on my Ranger craft sheet here, so the ink wipes up pretty easily. And when I change between colors, I want to make sure that I've really got all of the ink off because I'm actually stamping from lighter to darker. It might have made more sense to start at the bottom with the yellow color and go up because there would have been less of a chance of cross-contaminating with colors, but if you really make sure your stamp is clean in between, it's not going to be a problem. And I actually find that it's easier to clean your stamp just by stamping it off on paper than sometimes using the stamp cleaner itself, as sometimes it just sort of activates other ink that was on the stamp, and I mean, either way will work, but just sometimes to even just check it on a piece of scrap paper to make sure all that ink is gone is a great idea. I'm using the Hero Arts shadow inks, and something that you might notice in the stamping is that they kind of fade or dry back a little bit, and so when you first stamp them down, they're a little bit darker and heavier than once they dry. So something to keep in mind, not that it really makes that much of a difference, but just that sometimes it looks a little bit uneven and splotchy. So right there, I put my Happy Halloween too close to the other one. I had kind of been trying to just put a small gap, and that time I made the Happy Halloween accidentally touch. And what I decided to do is just keep going, not worry about it, because I'm thinking if I can put my focal image in that spot enough that you wouldn't even notice that that happened. And also that if I use the distressing from the sides, it's also going to create a little bit of a distraction. So I'm not worried about that. I'll be able to fix it eventually. And with clear stamps, it's pretty easy to line it up. As you saw, for the most part, I had success, but also when you're not working on camera, it's going to be a little bit easier to kind of get over it and make sure it's lined up correctly. I wanted to show the Copic coloring of the pumpkin. I'm not going to show all of the Copic coloring, but I just wanted to share a tip for getting some deeper shadows, or more interesting shadows, I guess. The most traditional way is to take three colors that are close in their number, which I have here, YR 68, 65, and 61. And then what I'm doing, and which is again the very sort of traditional way of Copic coloring, is to lay down the lighter color, then the medium, and then the darkest. Although in this instance, with the lightest color, I'm not immediately coloring the whole image with the lightest color, because I do want the center to stay a little bit lighter and whiter than everything else, and so by leaving it white until the very end, that creates a more dramatic highlight there. So I pull the medium to about the same spot that I pulled the light shade, then I blended it out, then I went in with the darker color and pulled it about halfway through the medium color, and I blended out with the medium, and once it's blended out with the medium, blend it out with the very lightest. and since this is the last round through, I am going to completely get at the center there so that it's covered and no spots are left white. And then as I kind of layer on some color, make sure that everything is blended evenly. The tip for shadowing that I wanted to include today is that sometimes you don't have the darker color that you're looking for in your collection, and what you can do is use the W markers to add shadows. I like the you can use gray markers in general. I like the W's personally, but there are also C's and N's that will give a similar look. I like the W's because they're supposed to be warm, and most often I'm going for an overall warm look on my cards, especially when you're working with animals. You do want that warm look. And then I took that W marker and I laid it in the areas that would have the most clear shadows, and that just helped me to get a little bit of extra dimension. Once I had everything layered down, I knew that I didn't want so much white on this card, that I've been doing a lot of cards with a lot of white area and white space, clean and simple cards, and I really do like them. But I also know that I like to add a lot of color, so I thought I would mix it up a little bit today. And I'm using Wild Honey Distress ink to distress the edges of the colored image and of the background paper that I created. For the ground underneath the pumpkin, I also put a little W marker there for a shadow of where the pumpkin meets the ground. Here, as I work with this large area, I don't want to get any fingerprint smudges in the center. I want that to remain a pretty clear white, and so I'm just taking a ripped up post-it note and covering the center so that way that area stays clean. And that's something that was a tip that I got on Periscope, and I believe it was Colleen who shared that tip. So I thought that other people might find that helpful if they have that tendency to ruin things with inky fingers. So once I had that completed, I'm just looking for some matte layers here, and since I was going to use the black matte for the back of the card, I thought, well, I might as well just cut out the scallop circle from the same piece since I'm going to be covering up most of that black cardstock anyway. No reason to use 2 sheets of black cardstock. So just a little tip to save some extra supplies if that's important to you. And I layer the colored image on the black scallop circle and then the panel onto the black rectangle as well, just so that they kind of continue to really coordinate with each other. The thing is, the Happy Halloween panel and the colored cat panel have the stitching detail on both of them. The circles are from MFT and the rectangles from Lawn Fawn, but now Lawn Fawn has both of them, and I believe so does MFT. So you can mix and match from the companies. It's really not that big a deal as long as you, and obviously you also don't have to use the stitch, but I do like that consistency. So here I just wanted to add a little bit of something extra to the card, and I've kind of been trying to use some of the things that I bought, like sequins and gems. I always try to be conscious of those because I could easily finish a card without them and be perfectly happy, but at the same time, that's the reason we bought all of these is to add that little something extra, that little sparkle to our cards. So I'm just kind of trying to create a random pattern from the top left to the bottom right, just to bring some extra attention here to the cat. And you might notice that it's being quite difficult for me to squeeze out that multimedia mat, and unfortunately I lost the cap to my bottle, so it's a little bit stuck. But that's it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafting tutorials, including Copic coloring or distress inks, you can subscribe to my channel. I'll leave you links to some other Halloween cards in the video description below so you can check those out, and also to Gerda Steiner's website so that you can check out her clear stamps. Thanks for watching. Bye.